to the supplier, informing him of things like the inventory levels, things like any feedback. And then, more importantly and even more complex, when we come to the flow of cash. Now, here is a whole new, we are standing at a very interesting point in the development of the supply chain industry. Maybe 5 to 10 years from now, this will be a commonplace. But right now, one of the very important and missing links in Pakistan has been the actual flow of cash from the customer back to the supplier. This is even more accentuated by the fact that our consumers, the customers of large, Pakistan is largely an unbanked country. How do we get the cash in time, without dilution, and in the most efficient cost back to the customer? Now, my experience and focus within my business has been, and at present time that TCS is very much engaged in, is combining the three flows of information. And this is where I would go into my next slide on the uniqueness, and I would, dare I say, that are very advanced supply chains in which we are moving not only the goods, but also the information flow and the cash flows. These have led us into some very complex terrains. Complex because the handling of cash then goes into the field of banking, comes under regulatory compliances, oversights. And so, hence, to complete the entire picture of the flows of the supply chain is where TCS is at the present time, and I'll explain to you how and what we have done in it so far. I'm doing it purely as a sharing of knowledge and information, and in no way is meant as an endorsement of my company or marketing, but purely as a sharing of knowledge as to where we stand and what were the complexities that we had to wade through. Okay, I'll slip one slide and I'll come to the enhanced supply chain solutions by TCS, and I've already spoken about it, but let me give you some examples. But before I get into the next slide, where I'm likely to lose my track of time, I would be grateful if somebody, when I'm 5 minutes short, please point out to me if there's somebody who would do that for me. Kassis up, could you? Because I'm going to get into an area where I get lost. I want to give you a bit of a history as to how TCS today, at this time, across the entire spectrum of our economy, is providing the services of those enhanced supply chains in the field of banking, to the telecommunications industry, in the field of education, pharmaceuticals, food supply chains, some of the government projects, our new initiative on e-commerce, and an activity on another supply chain of visa and travel facilitation. But let me start with banking. One thing I just want to explain to you where I've had struggle answering a question is, what is TCS? We are neither the largest logistics company, we are neither the largest trucking company, we are neither the largest e-commerce company. And as a matter of fact, at one time, I was given a questionnaire by the Competition Commission of Pakistan. And the questions that they were asked was, number one, what is your market size? Who are your competitors? And what method have you used to determine this market size? So when I said, who are my competitors? I listed the competitors were the airlines are the competitors, the trucking companies are competitors, the flower shops are competitors. And fields which is so vast, I have no way of determining what my market size is, and so haven't even used it. So the uniqueness of TCS is there's not one single organization in any particular field, but it is perhaps, when you link the dots, let me explain to you banking, which really set us up. Let me go for that a little bit into the history. The year was 1985, and at that time, it was, as you would recall, this was the time of General Zia-ul-Haq, the military rule, and the finance minister at that time happened to be a very progressive person called Dr. Mahbub-ul-Haq. Dr. Mahbub-ul-Haq, at that time, all the banks were nationalized. There were 5 major banks in the country, the Habib Bank, UBL, National Bank, ABL, and MCB, and they were all nationalized. And at that time, he, as a part of his own sort of a governance of the banks, made out what they called a document in their banking lingo is called a charter. And the charter was he wanted the banks to up their service. And one of the things, amongst many others, he gave them a deadline for, the deadline was for September 1985, and this he did it in June. And it says between June and September, I want the banks to increase the service standards. One that impacted us was that the outstation checks at that time. Outstation checks mean that if I'm a businessman from Rawalpindi and I've come and made a check payment to you in Karachi, the check transfer was actually taken at that time on an average 3 weeks before the money would go into the account. And he mandated that this should be done within 3 days. Actually gave 72 hours as a deadline. And in those days, he was a firm man, and he said if it's not done, for the first time he spoke of privatizing the banks. At that time, when that happened, the banks were all administered by a central body called the Pakistan Banking Council. And the Pakistan Banking Council tapped the courier companies. TCS was just 2 years at that time. We hardly had a network and coverage. And there were with me 2 other companies, and they were foreign companies. And the Banking Council, all the presidents of the banks and everybody